Pee Wee Herman delighted millions worldwide for decades. While this happened, Paul Rubens, the character's creator, fought unknown wars. Pee Wee's precipitous decline left fans with many questions. He kept a tragic secret for 6 years, which the world only discovered after his death. One of the world's most colorful individuals died. Why? Why did he hide the truth for so long? In his final note before his death, Paul Rubens revealed everything, which is heartbreaking, from childhood to celebrity. When Paul was a youngster, he didn't know he'd invent one of television's most recognizable characters, Pee Wee Herman. Judy and Milton Rubenfeld had Paul Rubens on August 27, 1952 in Peekskill, New York. Mother taught, father had a great background. He was a founding pilot of the Israeli Air Force and a World War II U.S. Army Air Force pilot. Young Paul must have been inspired by that bravery and courage, yet he didn't go into combat or politics. Much more colorful. Paul's family moved to Sarasota, Florida, when he was a few years old, changing everything for him. Not all of Sarasota was sunny. It was the Ringling Brothers' winter headquarters in Barnum and Bailey Circus. Any kid would have been thrilled. Paul thought it was magic. His attention was quickly drawn to the circus. He was moved by the clothing, physical comedy, and huge gestures. It went beyond watching shows. How joy was formed was the topic. He later claimed that seeing those clowns perform established the idea that performance was more than entertaining. It was art. Paul appeared in local plays and talent events as a teenager. Paul studied timing, body language, and laughter rhythm, while other students thought about sports or part-time employment. He was detail-oriented and loved absurdity. Soon, these features defined his most famous design. Paul sought greater stages after high school. After briefly attending Boston University, he found his passion at the California Institute of the Arts, an artistic hub in Valencia, California, founded by Walt Disney. He honed his enthusiasm for experimental theater, cinema, design, and storytelling at California Institute of the Arts. Paul joined the Groundlings, a famed Los Angeles improv and sketch comedy troupe, in the late 1970s, changing everything. Not simply a local show, the Groundlings launched several comic stars: Phil Hartman, Will Ferrell, Kristen Wiig, and more. It was there that Paul Rubens created Pee Wee Herman. This figure took time to come. Paul worked hard to shape the character. Pee Wee was odd with a cartoonish voice, childish joy, and uncontrolled energy, but he was also well-made. Paul worked on motions, his chuckle, wardrobe designs, and his signature antique art. Pee Wee Herman was first presented in a Groundlings sketch, but rapidly took off. It captivated audiences. This eccentric man-child was weirdly magnetic. He was surprising, hilarious, and unique in comedy at the time. Rubens risked creating the Pee Wee Herman Show in 1981, a live stage show mocking children's TV with talking furniture, dancing food, and silly puppets. A biting wit was hidden beneath the frivolity. HBO picked up the show as a special after 5 months of sold-out Los Angeles runs. Pee Wee Herman lost local popularity. He was a national phenomenon, but Paul was still going. He made Pee Wee's big adventure with unknown filmmaker Tim Burton in 1985. The match was great. Burton added his surrealism touch, while Rubens added Pee Wee's chaos. A unique, humorous, and poignant film was born, becoming a cult favorite. On a $7 million budget, the film grossed nearly $40 million, demonstrating Pee Wee Herman's pop cultural influence. Pee Wee's Playhouse, Rubens' crowning achievement, followed. The CBS Saturday morning children's show debuted in 1986 and was unique. It mixed live action, claymation, puppetry, and surreal humor in a high-energy show. Show didn't patronize youngsters. It stylishly emphasized imagination, diversity, and inquiry. Critics adored it, parents trusted it, and kids idolized it. Pee-wee's Playhouse won many Emmys over 5 seasons. Despite not being known by that name, Paul Reubens rarely broke character in interviews. He even performed live in Pee-wee mode. He built a fascinating, distinct universe that followers never wanted to leave. His effect went beyond comedy. Reubens pioneered bold, strange, and innovative children's television. In the late 80s, Pee-wee Herman was everywhere. There were toys, lunchboxes, Halloween costumes, and comics. Reubens was successful and at his best. Despite the accomplishment, the cameras missed something. Paul carried a weight he rarely discussed while the world laughed. Personal problems, secret heartbreaks, and a desperate plea. The gray suit and red bow tie were all the public saw for years. But behind it all lay a difficult and misunderstood man. How did a guy who brought millions delight face fame's darker side and his personal battles? What happened in the candy-colored playhouse's background? Pee-wee Herman's inner turmoil. Pee-wee Herman defined delight for millions of admirers worldwide. Playful, unexpected, innocent, and full of life. He seemed like a character in his own world, unaffected by age. Behind that bright smile and renowned laugh, Paul Reubens was fighting personal problems far more profound than his character could portray. Identity was a major issue for Paul. His character was so unique and beautiful that it eclipsed him. Longtime fans rarely asked about Paul Reubens, asking about Pee-wee. They wanted laughter, voice, and wide-eyed mischief. Despite being grateful for the affection and fame the persona afforded him, Reubens felt trapped by it. He said it seemed like living in a costume. Paul had little room to be himself because others expected him to act everywhere. Fame limited him in many ways, preventing growth, complexity, and vulnerability. His private battles continued despite stardom. For most of his career, Paul Reubens carried a secret burden. Because he lived in a time when disclosing romantic choices was risky, especially in Hollywood. He assiduously avoided queries about his personal life in interviews, keeping his romantic history and love life private. But many didn't realize how personal and hurtful the reality was. Reubens discussed his identity and acceptance issues in his later years, particularly in an incomplete documentary. He claimed that he had a long-term connection with another man during his stardom. When Pee-wee Herman was everywhere, he felt forced to suppress that side of himself because he believed honesty would hurt his career and carefully built character. In the past, entertainment was still defined by fixed expectations. Male actors, especially those with a large base, were often encouraged to keep some truths quiet. Reubens had to bury part of himself. He endured the emotional toll of keeping essential parts of his identity private for decades. Secrecy brought loneliness and solitude. Reubens was notoriously private. Despite his fame, tabloids rarely covered his parties or romances. He spent most of his time alone or with a small group of buddies while not filming or performing. He was nice, insightful, and creative, but also rather reclusive, according to friends. He struggled with loneliness and anxiety behind the scenes, especially after his peak fame. Reubens found himself in strange territory as Pee-wee Herman's popularity faded and newer comedians emerged. He no longer felt secure on his pedestal since the world had changed. He wasn't sure if he fit inside the industry anymore. He never stopped producing. He kept writing, sketching, and planning new projects, but differently. Reubens had more time to ponder, without cameras and performance pressure, but it hurt. He gave everything to Pee-wee Herman and left a legacy that would outlive him, but it cost him. He missed out on emotional openness and public freedom that many take for granted. He struggled to be regarded as Paul, not Pee-wee. He wants to be recognized via his character and as a person. As his career advanced, Paul became embroiled in severe conflicts and scandals that would haunt him for the rest of his life and affect his legacy. Career-shaking scandals. Paul Rubens created a world children loved and adults quietly respected. But in 1991, that bright paradise collapsed instantly. Rubens was arrested for indecent exposure at an adult movie theater in Sarasota, Florida, in July. The news was shocking because of both the arrest and the suspects. Pee Wee Herman wasn't only a character then. His image symbolized childhood innocence and joy. So, when the headline hit, public reaction was quick and brutal. Toy manufacturers dropped Pee Wee products overnight. Reruns were canceled projects. That's how Paul Rubens, who had spent years developing his craft and inspired many kids with his bizarre and lovely alter persona, ended up in exile. Context made the backlash difficult to accept. Rubens was arrested at a legitimate adult theater. He hadn't hurt anyone, but the public didn't care. The indignation machine was working and wanted headlines. Pee Wee Herman, previously beloved for his quirky innocence, was now used against its creator. Rubens didn't protest or make a spectacle, or transfer blame. Few celebrities in difficulty have the guts to do what he did. He vanished. He left the spotlight to let the media hysteria go down. Despite his silence, he was affected. That moment, and being rejected by an industry and audience he had given all to, haunted him for life. Another storm hit just as things were stabilizing. Legal difficulties returned for Rubens in 2002. In an unrelated inquiry, authorities raided his residence and found inappropriate and worrisome photographs and material. Rubens was stubborn this time. He claimed innocence from the start, saying the material was from a decades-old collection and not prohibited under the law. Case was messy. It had ambiguous claims and misleading headlines. Rubens was not charged with possession. His plea arrangement for a misdemeanor obscenity charge was not because he was guilty of the more serious charges, but because contesting it would have taken years and damaged his already fragile public image. However, the harm was done. His name was soiled in newspapers and TV again. Paul Rubens cleaned up after Pee Wee Herman's debacle. Something changed this time. Hollywood treated him differently in 2002 than in 1991. Industry actors, authors, and directors supported him. Rubens' co-workers knew the real him. They considered the arrests and claims as excessive public shaming, not a reflection of his character. They claimed that his defiance of Hollywood's norms made him an easy target. Rubens' Pee Wee's Big Adventure collaborator Tim Burton was one of his staunchest defenders. Others in comedy spoke out, highlighting Rubens' extraordinary contributions to entertainment, compassion, and kindness off-screen. The story changed for the first time. Thankfully, the world began to understand Rubens as a victim of horrible miscommunication. After years in the background, Rubens returned to the spotlight. He resumed acting in the mid-2000s with modest but noteworthy roles in TV and film. He played colorful villains and strange side characters with Pee Wee's trademark wit. Each performance was a gentle reminder that he was still firing. Perhaps his sufferings made his art more vivid and piercing. Public opinion gradually changed. People realized Paul Rubens was more than his controversies. The talented artist, misunderstood outcast, and man who had undergone more than most could comprehend, nevertheless found the strength to make people laugh. Never sought to erase his past. He didn't deny those sad chapters, but they didn't define his story. Instead, he let the work speak. That may have helped him re-establish his legacy. He gracefully returned to the public eye, but he kept one battle secret from most people. It would characterize his final chapter. He never discussed his health issues. Paul Rubens played the endlessly youthful, humorous, and enthusiastic Pee Wee Herman. But inside, he was fighting his most severe and secret battle, which few knew about. Rubens secretly battled acute myelogenous leukemia and metastatic lung cancer for 6 years. These diagnoses are difficult. Rapidly spreading acute myelogenous leukemia affects bone marrow and blood cells. A metastatic lung cancer has expanded beyond its original site. Each is awful, but combined they are brutal. However, Paul Rubens made an early choice that revealed his character. He concealed his ailment. No tabloid leaks, interviews implying medical issues, or pronouncements preparing the public for a possible goodbye. Those who saw him or worked with him during those years described him as intelligent, inventive, and passionate about his causes, still with the spark that made him famous decades earlier. This quiet courage is rare in entertainment. Rubens chose dignity in an age when every difficulty is made into content. Writing scripts, brainstorming Pee-wee concepts, and being connected to his creative energy kept him going. He never let his sickness define him, even when treatments wore him down. At 70, Paul Rubens died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles on July 30, 2023. The news shocked many because no one knew he was sick, and the loss was unexpected. Accept my apology for not going public with what I've been facing the previous 6 years, he wrote before his death on Instagram. I was always loved and respected by my friends, fans, and supporters. I love you all and enjoyed making art for you. It was a serious comment. Paul Rubens' gentle humility has always set him apart from Hollywood. He thanked his followers, explained his silence, and left a devastating and generous message in a few phrases. Fan, professional, and friend emotions erupted instantaneously. Tim Burton, who worked with Rubens, called him a terrific artist and friend. Rubens inspired many performers and comedians, including Conan O'Brien, Jimmy Kimmel, Natasha Lyonne, and others, to embrace their strangeness and voice. Social media was inundated with fan recollections. Some submitted Pee-wee's Playhouse or Big Adventure footage, while others shared childhood photos with dolls, remembering how the character made them laugh when they needed it. Behind the melancholy was astonishment at Paul Rubens' ability to work and smile during a 6-year battle with a sickness that would have broken most people. He never asked for pity and kept making people laugh despite an unbelievably awful situation. Paul Rubens was that. He performed and joked, but he was most of all a private man who gave the world everything he had, even at great sacrifice. Paul's tale was still unclear to the public after his death, because even though he had 2 cancers for years, his official cause of death report broke everyone's heart. Cause of Pee-wee's death. The days after Paul Rubens' death were filled with love, sorrow, and nostalgia. It raised an inevitable inquiry. What killed him? When the answer was revealed, most individuals were even more heartbroken. The LA County Medical Examiner determined that Rubens died from acute hypoxia respiratory failure, a dangerous illness in which the lungs cannot supply enough oxygen to the bloodstream. Rubens' respiratory failure was the ultimate stage of acute myelogenous leukemia with metastatic lung cancer. His body was progressively and fiercely ravaged by cancer. In his final days, his lungs failed. A gloomy diagnosis. Body's last stand is hypoxic respiratory failure. Lack of oxygen to key organs causes dyspnea, tiredness, and peaceful surrender in the final minutes. To lose someone as vibrant and innovative as Rubens to a slow illness was awful. Why Paul Rubens hid his condition remains a mystery. Some think it was his quiet, reclusive disposition, striving to keep his TV character and actual life apart. Others claim he took a traditional path to stardom. He didn't want to be sickly. He didn't want sympathy or grief to overwhelm his final years. Also, Rubens may have wished to keep Pee-wee's big personality as fans remembered him. Age wasn't supposed to affect Pee-wee Herman. He wasn't supposed to fatigue or fade. Rubens allowed Pee-wee to remain bright-eyed, impish, and energetic in the collective imagination by masking his disease. His death felt like a shock by this decision, and a light went out unexpectedly. It was also the last act of a private man who had always valued creativity and control over public confession. Before leaving, Paul Rubens did something unexpected. He opened up like never before, letting cameras see his hidden aspects. He revealed real, honest, and disturbing information. Last communication from Pee-wee. Paul Rubens lived behind a sturdy wall for decades. He was half showman and part mystery, but he made one last decision that breached that wall before his death. Fans and critics were surprised by his posthumous documentary, Pee-wee as Himself. It is a highly personal, stripped-back depiction of a man who revealed himself in his final chapter after years of hiding behind a character. The documentary includes almost 40 hours of Rubens' interviews during his final years. His most candid worldview is shown. Paul Rubens speaks candidly about his work, personal struggles, and most intimate realities without slick editing or spectacular recreations. His honesty about his identity is moving in the film. Rubens kept his romantic life and choices covert for years, not out of shame, but out of concern about what the entertainment business may do with that information, how it would affect the Pee-wee brand, and whether it would make him a headline. In the documentary, he frankly discussed his rewarding long-term connection with a man, which had to be kept private. He also discussed the emotional toll of being so close to Pee-wee Herman. Despite popularity, purpose, and a generation of loving fans, the character sometimes confined him. He said it was hard to differentiate Paul from Pee-wee for the audience and himself. He felt confused and lonely since his own self and his impersonation had blended. He directly addressed his career-defining controversies, especially his 1991 Florida theater indecent exposure arrest. Rubens acknowledged the humiliation and career impact of the public response and media frenzy that followed him. He detailed his 2002 arrest and how public attention and backlash worsened. However, he clarified that the situation was misinterpreted. He described being mislabeled and tormented by the public for so long as something he wasn't. Rubens eventually revealed his long-hidden health issues. He spoke with incredible serenity and humility about living with cancer, having treatments while working, and the mental exhaustion of carrying such a big weight in quiet. Being Pee-wee is more than a documentary. It's Paul Rubens' ultimate gift, and a chance to share his narrative in his own words after a lifetime of being misunderstood, questioned, and ignored outside of his persona. It reminds us that behind the loud laugh, red bow tie, and frantic energy was a human person who suffered, loved, and accepted his history.